I preached about a month ago. It just turned out that Dave is on his vacation, his fishing vacation, and Frida was supposed to preach today, but she was unable to. You probably don't remember, but a month ago I talked about my dog Zeke being my spiritual director, and found out that he has taught me a lot of lessons, and he even taught me a lesson before he came to live with us. It went something like this. Janet said that she heard about a rescue puppy and she thought we ought to get him. And I said, okay. Then I asked, well, what do we do with an energetic puppy and teach him how to pee and poop outside, not in the house? And Janet said, we'll be patient and he'll learn as he mellows and grows a little older. And I said, okay. Then I asked, well, what do we do if we have to go away? And Janet said, well, there's boarding places, and there's friends and family, and there's pet sitters. And I said, okay. And then I asked, well, where will he sleep? And Janet said, in our bed. And I asked, well, okay. But I asked then, what about the odor and the smell? And Janet said, he'll get used to it. I did. So he taught me a lesson even before it came. But this sermon's not about humility. I would say it's about hope. Most of us know what a gargoyle is, but if you had asked me as a kid, I would have said it has something to do with a gargle of mouthwash. My mother made me gargle Listerine, and when I was sick, salt water. But the gargoyle, spelled Gargoyle, refers to an ugly, grotesque figure, part human, part animal, a figure used as a waterspout on buildings in medieval times. Gargoyles served as the end of rain gutters, with water shooting out grotesque, gaping mouths. This is where the name comes from, an old French word, gargouille, I think is how do you say that? French word, gargouille, it's close. Meaning actually throat, from which we actually do have the connection to gargle. Now, many of the great cathedrals of the world have gargoyles, including Notre Dame that I once visited years ago. The same great cathedral that burned a few years ago, or part of it burned significantly. The gargoyles are carved into the architecture, clustered around steeples and towers, and we may wonder why these fascinating creatures are placed alongside steeples on the cathedrals. British journalist Malcolm Muggeridge, who converted to the Christian faith late in life, once gave an interview on BBC reflecting on the relationship between steeple and gargoyle. He concluded that steeples symbolize God, or at least the human quest for God, whereas gargoyles symbolize human baseness, its petty, puny quest for the holy that sometimes ends up in ugliness. Now, whatever the relationship, life is often like a cathedral, and you know this, with both steeples and gargoyles, with blessings, but also ugly struggles. Now, some tell us to deny the struggles by thinking positively, optimistically, advocating an ever-smiling Jesus as the face of God. Others of us, perhaps most of us, try to deny the struggles by distracting ourselves with busyness and material things and pleasure and movies and TV and reading whatever. But sooner or later, we come to face with life spouting, gargoyle-like struggles. We are like Charlie Brown in the Peanuts cartoon strip, standing with Linus as they look over a fence, weary faces resting in their hands. And Linus says, sometimes I feel life has passed me by. Do you ever feel like that, Charlie Brown? And Charlie Brown, in his normal melancholy mood, replies, no, I feel like it's knocked me down and walked all over me. Now, many times in life indeed is steeples of enjoyable experiences, like family, friendships, work, eating, sports, travel, reading, hobbies, quality times with few shadows. But there are also times of suffering, pain, illness, accidents, insecurity, financial setbacks, anxiety, rejection, with brokenness in relationships, anger, bitterness. Times when the gargoyles swirl about us with a certain bleakness. In the midst of a life that is like a cathedral, with both steeples and gargoyles, the Apostle Paul in Romans 8 affirms a faith that realistically faces these gargoyles, trying to let steeples emerge. And Paul tells us that gargoyle-like struggle is a part of creation itself. Verse 20 of chapter 8, which Floyd read for us, says, for creation itself was condemned to lose its purpose, not of its own will, but because God willed it to be so. Now, famous preacher, United Methodist preacher and professor and bishop, Will Willimon, of Duke University status, expresses the frustration of creation in a book he once wrote called Sign for Eden, and he writes, we humans are, first of all, animals. We may achieve many things in life, but we never escape this primal fact. We exist in a world where life continues only because of a constant, bone-crushing, blood-drinking, devouring drama. Human life, for all of its occasional grandeur, builds its home upon the carnage of millions of slain chickens, herds of cattle, sties of pigs, and rivers of fish. Humanity raises its head over a field of corpses, smacks its lips, smiles into the sun, and says, life is good. Because we are animals, the instinct for survival is strong. And like any other creature, we are driven by the will to consume, survive, and propagate. And yet, Will Willimon says, unlike the other animals, so far as we know, we humans are cursed with a unique characteristic. We are conscious that we will die. We fear death, yes, but the thing we fear about death is annihilation, insignificance. We want to know that our lives count for something, that something of us will endure even in the face of years which come to an end like a sigh in Shakespearean terms. This is the major promise of any religion, false or true religion. We shall transcend death. We shall somehow transcend our insignificance. Now, Paul uses the image of pregnancy and childbirth to describe the struggle with gargoyles of cosmic and human existence, our struggle with death, our struggle to construct steeples of faith in God's presence. And like a pregnant woman, something wonderfully, mysteriously grows within us. First, there is little discomfort. Then comes increasing discomfort. And ultimately, the pains of labor in order for something to be birthed. Eugene Peterson's paraphrase of this passage in his translation called "The Message is Poignant." He renders, all around us we observe a pregnant creation. The difficult times of pain throughout the world are simply birth pangs. But it's not only around us, it's within us. The Spirit of God is arousing us within. We're also feeling the birth pangs. Those sterile and barren bodies of ours are yearning for full deliverance. That is why waiting does not diminish us any more than waiting diminishes a pregnant mother. We are enlarged in the waiting. We are enlarged in the waiting. We, of course, don't see what is enlarging us. The longer we wait, the larger we become, and the more joyful the expectancy. Now, those paraphrased words, enlarged in the waiting, are echoed in the beliefs of an 80-year-old Georgetown University professor named John F. Halt, whose writings on science and religion I recently came across. I think Brother Don's reading a few things by him. Halt believes that many of our ideas and experiences with God have focused on the past, with a literalism fixated on ancient peoples, scriptures, traditions, and some supposed paradisal world of long ago. Other ideas and experiences with God have focused on an enduring present, a present that is eternal and timeless, to which we can supposedly tap into in this life and also in any afterlife. But John Halt thinks our ideas and experiences with God have failed to take into consideration a crucial thing: the larger universe, time, and the need to have a focus on the future, on hope, on an amazing unfolding universe that is expanding outward at increasing speed, beyond all human imaginations. In faith, he believes, we can see God behind this expansion, luring the entire universe into the love we have glimpsed and experienced in Jesus. We humans, in a sense, are God's way of having the universe awaken unto itself. Now, I think John Halt is suggesting that on the river of life, we have a tendency to look back upstream toward the past. Or we secure ourselves to an anchoring place on the bank or a dock in the present. But we need to somehow look downstream, move downstream, around the bend to what we cannot see, and somehow trust that the future is in God's hands. And we don't know yet where we in the universe are completely going, or where the river is going, but the world is unfolding, and God and us are unfolding with it, and we can only wait in this unfolding, hoping to be enlarged in the waiting. This past fall, Janet and I traveled from Richmond to New York City to see the New York Yankees play. Forgive me, Ann, all you Red Sox fans. But Aaron Judge was chasing 63 homers. And the tickets and a stay at a condo overlooking Central Park were free from in-laws. We went by train on a 6-hour trip. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, there's a feeling of security and simplicity about traveling by train. The sound of rails, whistles, and intercom instructions, and no hassle from the airport security lines, or turbulence, or weather delays, or the avoidance of highway congestion. But the trip also brought to mind the words of one wise observer. We want life to be like a train, but it turns out to be like a sailboat. We want life to be like a train, but it turns out to be like a sailboat. Now, this incisive thought suggests not just the way things are, but a way we can deal with reality steepled with goodness and gargled with frustrations. I would be the first to confess to you, and Janet would tell you, I'm a train person. I like security. But I know deep down that I need more of a sailboat mentality. We all do. And I must say, I've always been attracted to sailboats, the lure of them. I've never been on one, never had the means or wherewithal to operate one. But with a sailboat, you have to leave the dock, leave the harbor, the shore, the bay, and launch out into unknown winds and currents. There will most probably be storms and rough times. Some groaning from the pains of dealing with unknown weather, high waves, stressed sails, challenged rudders, and where the winds will take us. We have to, in a sense, wait to see where we will end up, whether in some faraway land of paradise or some endless water under unrelenting sun. The wind and the waves can never be fully seen or predicted. But still we launch in hope, knowing the wisdom of an old sailor that was once given to a small boy. The boy asked, "Sir, can you explain the wind?" "No," the old sailor said, "but I can hoist a sail." This goes to the heart of Romans 8. We are to be enlarged in the waiting. We cannot explain the Spirit or a world filled with gargoyles, but we can hoist a sail. And though we often groan from the pain of existence, we know those groans hide the steeple-like hope that something good is somehow being birthed in the universe as a whole and in our hearts and lives as humans, even our hearts and lives as people of faith. Gargoyles will always adorn our lives, but we are called to place them under steeples of hope. If we have hope, we can be enlarged in the waiting. We can blow our struggles out like gargoyle spouts, facing any desperation and despair in our souls. We can face darkness, suffering, and evil in the world with eyes on the Jesus who gives hope. And we can know that in all things, God works for good, as the Apostle Paul puts it. Back in 1958, a 19-year-old Chinese pianist placed second at the first international Tchaikovsky competition. He returned to his homeland and became an established concert pianist in China. But in the mid-1960s, he was imprisoned by Mao Zedong's wife for playing Western music. He was locked away and beaten so severely that his forearm was fractured. For 6 long years, he lived in a tiny prison cell with nothing except a book of Mao's teaching. When United States President Richard Nixon visited China, the young man was released and requested to perform with the Philadelphia Orchestra for Chinese propaganda purposes. He did well, only to be put back in jail for another 18 months. Finally, he was released, but was still able to play brilliantly. China began to change, and he emerged into the international limelight as a brilliant pianist. How he and his hands survived 7.5 years has baffled knowledgeable musicians. In prison, he was denied everything except one thing the guards could not take away. For 7.5 years, in a tiny prison cell, Liu Shikun practiced his beloved music in his vivid, disciplined imagination on a piano that only he could see in his mind. Despite his gargoyle-like existence, despite the frustrations and the groanings, he kept hope alive. He was enlarged in the waiting, and things worked out for good. Now, like this Chinese musician, Tommy Dorsey, the black jazzman and gospel songwriter, was also a man who discovered what it meant to be enlarged in the waiting. At a religious gathering in St. Louis, Missouri, he got the terrible gargle-like news by telegram that his wife was dead. The place was packed, and people were having a good time asking for another song. He had left his wife sound asleep at home in her last month of pregnancy. Hastily, he clambered back to Chicago to learn that she had died giving birth to a son, who also died a day later, both buried in the same casket. Tommy Dorsey fell apart in sorrow, without any peace, wondering where God was in all this pain. But the next Saturday, he meandered close to a piano and began to fiddle with the keys. Fresh words came as a melody suddenly appeared from his burdened and questioning heart. Precious Lord, take my hand. Lead me on, let me stand. I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm worn. Through the storm and through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. His sorrow began to turn to joy, and resurrection became reality, leading him to say, so I go on living for God willingly and joyfully until that day when he will take my hand and gently lead me home. He was enlarged in the waiting. So may we. Please pray with me. God, as we sit here today in the peace of this place, most of what we are experiencing is good. Our lives are good. But there are many things that we struggle with, gargle-like things, that somehow threaten the steeple of hope from emerging from our lives. In these moments, we pray that you will give us the grace to reach out for your hand, affirming you as our precious Lord, and somehow finding a way home.